The hunt for under-the-radar fantasy studs continues on the Wednesday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with a dive into a few bottom-feeding clubs. The Montreal Canadiens, Arizona Coyotes, and Philadelphia Flyers. What's going on with all three of these clubs? Steele's back in the booth, baby, and I'm going to break it all down with him on today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hockey heads, degenerate gamblers, and of course, fantasy fanatics, welcome back to your show. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I am rejoined by my esteemed co-host, Mr. Steele Roden. Make sure you check out his work all across YouTube under NHL Quick Hits and all over the Locked On Network. On this side of the microphone, it's your boy, Big Flip Livingstone. You know where you can find my work. Oh my God. Pickboss.com and everywhere else you need your fantasy hockey takes. It's a little bit of a sloppy episode today, people, but thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We appreciate all that love and support. We see the comments, we see the feedback, and we know that fantasy draft is drawing near. So on today's episode, Steele and I need to break down some of these teams, Steele, that you might not be looking at as a newer GM in the fantasy realm, but you need to get some of these players on some of these teams, Steele, even if we think they're not going to do well in the standings. Philadelphia Flyers, Sean Couturier, Cam Atkinson. Is there still some value there? I'm very intrigued to hear what you have to say, Steele. Arizona Coyotes, inking Matt Dumba. I know you have some takes on this player. One I know you've had your eye on quite a bit in Minnesota. And Montreal, the third team in that mega three-team swap for Erik Karlsson. What does this mean for their fantasy success, Casey DeSmith and otherwise? Steele, I fumbled a little bit off the top there. I think you leave that one in, though, because that's a funny edit. But at the end of the day, we're getting serious around here because I think you're even in a fantasy draft, if I do not fully forget, that starts very early. There's probably some other GMs out there getting into the nitty-gritty. Let me throw it over to you. We'll start with the Flyers. What's your take on some of their players overall? We'll start with those veterans, but I think there's some really good young pieces here to be had.
There are some good young pieces, and the draft hasn't started quite just yet. It should be coming in the next few weeks, maybe the end of August. So we're getting prepared for that. But yeah, the Philadelphia Flyers, some news coming out of them, out of their organization, signed Samuel Ersson to a 2-year, $2.9 million deal. Young goaltender who got a little bit of action last year with the Flyers. And depending on how Cal Peterson backs up Carter Hart, he could potentially get some action as well this next season behind Carter Hart. So it's a very interesting situation for Samuel Ersson back there. Obviously, the news of Cam Atkinson returning fully healthy, being in the Philadelphia Flyers roster and lineup for next season to start the year is some great news as well. He does bring some fantasy value. Just looking at the last season he played, 2021 and 22, played 73 games, 23 goals, 50 points. It is a little bit of a concern that he is now 34 years old. He hasn't played a year and a half in the NHL. Yep. Does that affect the fantasy value as well as the players that he's playing with? Because we know this Philadelphia Flyers team is not as strong as the others in the Metropolitan Division, as strong as the Eastern Conference. To be honest with you, I think Philadelphia is in a little bit of trouble. I think they are the worst team in the Eastern Conference by far. That's not to say that there is no fantasy value to be had on this team. We know Travis Konechny is the best player. I'm not sure if I would take him earlier than the 6th round. But, again, there's fantasy value to be had. Morgan Frost, Owen Tippett, Scott Lawton. I think, you could take probably a flyer, a chance on Cam Atkinson, a little bit risky with his injury and his age at this point. And we can talk about Carter Hart being a stud that he is. Not a lot of help in front of him, though. I think defensively, that blue line is absolutely atrocious. I don't think there's one player on that blue line that you could actually draft for your fantasy hockey team. It might be the worst blue line in the NHL, maybe now tied with the San Jose Sharks that Erik Karlsson's now gone. But again, I think overall thoughts on the Philadelphia Flyers. There is some fantasy value to be had with those young players that I mentioned, but overall standing wise, I think Philadelphia is at the bottom of the barrel.
I got a few quick things to say about this Philadelphia club. And I think the main takeaway for me right off the jump is Sean Couturier and Cam Atkinson a couple of years ago are draftable fantasy pieces. Maybe Couturier a little bit higher than Atkinson because there were a couple of seasons there Couturier was putting up 76. Let me see the 76 points, 59 points in 69 games in 2020. He is actually only 30 years old, Steele, but he has been dealt some very serious injury blows as well. So I'm not coming on this episode to say put Cam Atkinson and Sean Couturier on your draft cards, but I will come on this episode and say this. They do have a lot of really good young pieces up front. Not talking about the blue line, because the blue line is, in my opinion, along with yours, atrocious. And actually, they were the 6th worst penalty kill in the league last year, and they were bottom dead last in power play efficiency last year. So the special teams is straight up and down doo-doo. But there is only one way from here, and it's up. Another year of Carter Hart in there. I think he's going to be, take another step forward. The blue line's a concern, but all I wanted to say is Sean Couturier and Cam Atkinson, if healthy, which are big ifs for both of these guys, might be nice little first or second week fantasy waiver wire ad steal because of Noah Cates as well. We don't want to forget about Noah Cates, Owen Tippett, and some of those other young pieces you mentioned. They might now, as veterans with reduced roles, might be able to bring a little bit of value if they can get healthy on those weeks where the Flyers, let's say, play 4 or maybe even if you get lucky, somehow 5 games in, 8 or 9 days. That's where I see some value with these players. That's what I wanted to come on and say about the Philadelphia Flyers. And lastly, Steele, let me throw it over to you about this one. Carter Hart, you mentioned this situation. Are you drafting him, and where are you drafting him, in your opinion? Because that, I think, for me, is the biggest piece of fantasy value here by far. And I know there's some good young studs up front. You mentioned Konechny. It's Carter and Konechny for my 2 studs here.
Look, that's a great question. And again, I will connect this to what I think of the blue line. I don't think he has any help whatsoever in front of him. I think you could probably take a chance as well as on Travis Sanheim, 27 years old. Maybe Cam York gets a little bit more power play time
I like Cam York
more time as well on average. But other than that, Rasmus Ristolainen is just an absolute gong show out there.
Yes.
I'm forgetting, Nick Sealer, I believe.
Oh, I got it up here. Yeah, I got it up right
Nick
here.
Sealer.
Mark Stahl is now back there.
Sean
Walker.
Mark Stahl is just an absolute liability. Sean Walker doesn't produce anything offensively. So fantasy value-wise, there's not much to be had. But even just overall, defensively, helping out their goaltender,
they're going to get scored on a lot.
They are going to get scored on a lot, and I don't know if I can take another year of heartbreak for Carter Hart. And again, his name was rumored to be around the trade block a little bit the last year.
Yeah,
that could be something the Philadelphia's move towards at the trade deadline because Travis Konechny's name was there as well. Maybe they just go full rebuild mode, trade Carter Hart, Travis Konechny, and a few other guys maybe. On their roster right now. I just don't see them being a legitimate threat or competition for that much this entire season. They just don't have any ringers on their team. They don't have that stud. And then Travis Konechny is a great hockey player, but I'm not going to fully commit to calling him a stud and a ringer right now compared to the other talent in the NHL and of course the Eastern Conference. So for me, Carter Hart, I would most likely be staying away from him. If he falls towards me in the right draft or the right round, I'll take a flyer on him if he's my second goaltender, maybe even third goaltender. But other than that, I'm staying away from Carter Hart goalie stats wise.
A lot of risk to be had with a number of these pieces, especially Carter Hart. But I really do believe in Owen Tippett, Travis Konechny, Noah Cates. And you know what? Given the right format, you're going to have to probably roll the dice on Carter Hart. Given where you're drafting in that first round of, let's say, a keeper dynasty, and you don't have a good goalie situation, those first couple of rounds, you might have to roll the dice with Carter Hart because the options are going to get even thinner. And he will, say what you will, he is going to get that lion's share of the starts in Philly.
Yeah.
That's the one thing we do know, but that might be the only positive is he's going to get some wins by default. let's just see what happens, Steele. Let's not forget about today's episode being sponsored by and brought to you by our friends at Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs make you look good. The stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Steele, I don't know if you got your recent gifty pack from Bird Dogs. Man's got a new hat. Man's got a new pair of jogging pants and another beautiful pair of golf shorts. And I'm telling you, people, I gave one of these pairs of shorts to my father-in-law. He is wearing these out in the men's league. He's wearing them into meetings. He's wearing them out on a town, and the big boy is looking sharp. So you need to be checking out Bird Dogs all the time, all summer long, as your go-to for your casual and for your upscale wear. Go to birddogs.com/lockedon or enter promo code LockedOnNHL for a free white tech hat with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL or promo code LockedOnNHL for a free white tech hat. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. We're checking them out all summer long.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your favorite team from all 4 major sports leagues, including the NCAA, your team every single day. And Flip, I am a little bit upset right now. I haven't got my Bird Dogs order because
you moved.
I forgot to switch my address to my new location.
Someone in West Vancouver right now.
It's outside my apartment in Vancouver right now, waiting. So I probably won't get that for probably another month until my girlfriend moves back there in the beginning of September. So I'll get it eventually. But I'm going to have to wait a little bit. I'm going to have to wait. And we're not going to wait any longer for this topic. Arizona Coyotes, they sign Matthew Dumba to a 1-year, $3.9 million deal. I want your take actually on this first. I know Matt Dumba is my boy. He's Minnesota Wild guy. But I want your take on your position of where the Arizona Coyotes stand and what you think about this contract.
Well, let me throw this out for you. Just a little food for thought. Last year, the Arizona Coyotes allowed 35 shots against per game. Only 2 teams allowed more, and those are the Columbus Blue Jackets and Anaheim Ducks. So when I look at this defensive lineup this year, Steele, JJ Moser, Matt Dumba, Valimaki, Troy Stetcher, and I like me some Sean Durzi action.
Yes, you do.
Also throw in Victor Soderstrom, little bit of an unknown, but let's see what happens there. Yes, this team is probably still going to battle to stay out of the basement on most nights, but something in my gut tells me they're going to be a lot better. And I know that's a weird thing to say after they're going to battle for the basement at times, but I think they are going to surprise some teams. And when I look at some of the young players, Steele, and I will come back to Matt Dumba in a second, I like Karel Vejmelka. I actually like Baron Hayton, Clayton Keller, Nick Schmaltz. And we've talked a lot about also some of the other pieces, more recently, Logan Cooley, our boy Michelli. They bring in Kerfoot. They bring back Bukestad. Dylan Gunther we haven't talked about. We mentioned Jack McBain. I'm just kind of excited for the fantasy pieces. And when you put it all together, Steele, why doesn't this team take a step forward? Why not? And to bring it back to Dumba, some of those peripherals were sliding. Some of the numbers, underlying metrics weren't so good. I still think this guy brings a lot to like. I love the defensive edge and that physicality that he can bring if he reins it in and plays his game. I think he's going to need to be counted on as a leader on that blue line of young blue liners. And I'll leave it at this. At 5-on-5 over the last 5 seasons, I'm pretty sure Matt Dumba was scored on more than any other Minnesota blue liner. So he just straight up and down needs to be better. But I actually think he might have a sneaky good comeback season, Steele, and I'll turn it back over to you for that take.
He does need to be better, but first of all, I like this contract. It's to prove it, show us what you can do. He's 29 years old, 1 year, $3.9 million. I do agree with you that the stats, fantasy wise, have fallen off a cliff right there. There's not much fantasy value to be had with him, but I like what this brings to the organization. Like you said, it brings a veteran bulldog defenseman. Who can shut it down defensively sometimes with that tenacity, with the energy and the big hits, like you mentioned. And also, again, like you said, good presence for the young guys on the blue line, Valimaki, Moser, Durzi, and those guys and such. we're both very, very excited about this young core, especially the top six. And I'm going to throw McBain in there since he's in the bottom six, but the young six, the young core in the top six now with Logan Cooley on his entry-level contract. You know how I feel about Karel Vejmelka in the cage. 50, 55 starts is not out of the question for him. His stats are getting better. He's getting a better win record over the last 2 seasons. He's got better defensemen in front of him now. And like you said, it's only up for the Arizona Coyotes here. I like where they're heading. I do think they actually take a big step this upcoming season. They just have so much talent, and they're getting better and better every year. The thing that really pops it off for me, like, again, they're not going to be battling for a playoff spot. They're going to be a lot better, though. What really sells me on the Arizona Coyotes now is they have 34 draft picks over the next 3 seasons. 20 of which are in the first 3 rounds. So they have many draft capital. So I could very much so imagine that they could probably get some deals done at the trade deadline as well. I'm not saying they're going to be in the mix, but they can start adjusting, retooling for the next season as well, acquiring some players, maybe some more draft picks. So I like where the team's at right now. I think they're going to continue to get better. Matt Dumba wise, I don't know if I would actually necessarily draft him. I do think he'll have a better season, but 14 points in 7.
That's tough.
14 points in 79 games. I like the blocks. I like the hits, but only 99 shots. Yeah, there's just not a lot of value there, in my opinion. And I do like him as a player, but fantasy value wise, don't think there is anything there.
You know what? I always have that keeper dynasty angle on, and I can't help but think about, and our listeners know this. I'm in a 16-team keeper dynasty, and Matt Dumba is coming off the draft board because he just fills out those peripherals. And sometimes on the back end of your team, when you do have, I got 6 D-men to fill, Steele, in a league of 16 GMs. So Matt Dumba, I would be happy in that situation to take. But after that, you're 100% right. And I'll leave it at this. Jack McBain bringing the body. Lawson Krause bringing the body. Nick Bukestad up the middle, tough to play against. Jason Zucker coming in, tough to play against. Now you're starting to free up some space for some of these young guns, Nicky Schmaltz, Clayton Keller, our boy Michelli, Alexander Kerfoot, who we know who can slot in and play a little bit of everywhere. And now you're talking about pairing that with the blue line. Matt Dumba also bringing that edge. Troy Stetcher is known to throw around the body. Maybe all of a sudden, I think the word that we can throw out there to describe this Coyotes team, they're going to be a pesky bunch to play against. And I'm going to say, and when I looked at the standing, Steele, you're right. I really don't see them battling for a playoff spot. I'm not ready to get that bold because they finished 25 points short of that second playoff bubble spot. But I'll say this, 80 plus points this season is very much in their realm. And then what does that mean for next season? They might be right there knocking on the door for one of those bubble spots. So they're really not that far out. And that means fantasy value on the come up for this Coyotes team.
Very much so. And again, a lot of disrespect went towards Clayton Keller, especially last year the guy had like 75, 85 points.
Put some respect on his name.
Put some respect on Keller's name because he is the star and the leader of that team moving forward and has been so the last few years. We are going to move over to the Montreal Canadiens, talk about what they got in that Erik Karlsson 3-team deal trade. Very shocking about what Kyle Dubas was able to pull off. I watched the episode, loved what you had to say there.
Hey,
we're going to move forward though to the Montreal Canadiens and what they acquired in that deal.
I got it right here.
Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Hit that subscribe, hit the follow button. We appreciate all that love and support. Leave a review on your favorite podcast platform as well. Continue leaving the comments on the YouTube channel. Flip and I are responding all the time, every morning, right when the episode has dropped. We will get back with you to you with a reply on whatever question or just statement, comment, whatever you left on the YouTube channel. We'll make sure to get back to you as soon as possible. So we appreciate all the conversations we have with our listeners out there. The Montreal Canadiens, though, I'll throw it over to you for the full deal because I don't have that in front of me. I know Jeff Petry and I know Casey DeSmith were a part of it, but what was the full deal that Montreal got out of this?
No problem, brother. I got it ready to go right here for you, just in case, because usually you have my back. So I got to try and keep this relationship 50-50 because that's key. Now, Pittsburgh acquires defenseman Erik Karlsson, Rem Pitlick, and Dylan Hamlick for San Jose's 2026 third-round draft pick. We know about that. Let's talk about Montreal. Montreal acquires Pittsburgh's 2025 second-rounder, defenseman Jeff Petry, and goaltender Casey DeSmith, and the prospect Nathan Lagar. I just want to leave it at this because I'll put it back to you very quickly, Steele. The Montreal Canadiens got a really good performance from Sam Montembault down the stretch last year.
They did.
He really got some heads turning. But now you have a situation with Casey DeSmith in there that I think there's going to be a natural 50-50 split with these two goalies. I think that's what's going to happen. I think they're also going to get a good chance to maybe win a little bit of the side of the crease for whoever plays better. So I think both of these goalies, Steele, become very, very intriguing. And I actually don't hate this for the overall success of the Montreal Canadiens, because now you don't have to run. Who are they running out there as that third stringer for a while? Because things were getting ugly in Montreal goaltending wise.
Well, what's your take? Because now that they have three goalies. They got Jake Allen, they got Sam Montembault, and they got Casey DeSmith. Do you go with Montembault and DeSmith to start, or
that's who I would go with? Because
completely giving up on Jake Allen.
I'm not completely giving up on Jake Allen, but maybe I need to see this light a fire under the veterans' bonnet, because I actually haven't seen enough for me to consider. Look, they made this move for DeSmith for a reason. So how are they going to utilize it? It's obviously has a lot to do with Allen, because Montembault proved that he was the best goalie option they had. So I'm not worried about that angle. And I will stop rambling here, because I think there's something more to be said about bringing in Petry and DeSmith and improving this overall quality of this team, Steele. Because there are some, speaking of good young pieces on a bad team, Montreal has a couple of those. Mike Hoffman's contract is out of there. Good couple of moves here for Montreal, but I'll turn it back over to you. What do you think overall about this move?
Yeah, I like it. Obviously from a Pittsburgh Penguins standpoint, it's a home run in my opinion. I like the fact they get Erik Karlsson, they get rid of Mikael Granlund's contract. They don't have to give up too much. From the Montreal standpoint as well, they get Jeff Petry back. They pretty much sent it. Yeah, they traded him to Pittsburgh, played 61 games there. Get him back just the following offseason. So they send him there for a loan. They get him back. And I think he brings a lot to the table as well. He had 31 points in 61 games last year with the Pittsburgh Penguins, 190 hits, 111 blocks, shots a little bit down, 113. But those peripheral stats do add up. And I think he does bring that veteran presence and still has it in him defensively to get it done in the defensive zone. And I agree with you. Sam Montembault was the better goalie was the best goalie for the Montreal Canadiens last year at 26 years old. He was actually a goaltender that I picked up quite frequently and ended up just leaving him on my roster for the remaining 3 months of the season because he was just that good in my opinion. So I agree with you that I would like to see Casey DeSmith and Sam Montembault start the season and see how the tandem kind of works from there. Again, Jake Allen has shown from time that he can be a little bit of a consistent goaltender, but sometimes inconsistent at the same time. So overall, Montreal Canadiens get Jeff Petry back. They're, fantasy value wise, where would you even take him? He's still a draftable defenseman just because of those peripheral stats.
Most likely, that's got to be right. Like that's one of my fill-in D-men. That's one of my fill-in D-men. Like absolutely back end of the draft, because I am just worried about those plus-minus numbers. He's also just going to get run ragged trying to play D for this group. That looking at it offensively, Steele, Cole Caulfield, Suzuki, Kirby Dach, Josh Anderson, Alex Newhook, Juraj Slafkovsky another year. They still have the pest Brendan Gallagher, Sean Monahan, Harvey Pinard also. There's some very, they're going to be, again, definitely struggling this year overall. And I guess just the main point that I want to make here, and this is how I thought this situation should break down if I was the GM in Montreal, I throw out DeSmith out there to get his confidence in, to light a bit of a fire under Jake Allen. Then you hope Jake Allen comes in, you give him an opportunity, and he has a couple of good games, ship him out. Get him out of here, because there's going to be a team looking for a veteran backup at some point. So try and build his value slightly if possible and get a valuable piece in, because I think the clear-cut duo is the younger two, DeSmith and Montembault. But again, if they bring in DeSmith for basically nothing and he starts to play great, Why not package him out and get even more return? This team is in flux. The fantasy value is in flux. So just be very careful. Mike Matheson, love the value. I really like Nick Suzuki. Cole Caulfield, healthy, of course. Kirby Dock's going to get a chance on that right side. Those are all back-end pieces for me, aside from Caulfield and Suzuki. But hey, this is what we're talking about on today's episode. Mining some of these, bottom-feeding clubs for some good fantasy angles. You just have to be very, very cautious and tap into this show, baby. You know what's good.
Yeah, and we're hoping that, again, Montreal dealt with a lot of injuries last year. Again,
most man games lost.
Sean Monahan, Yuri Slafkovsky, and Mr. Wi-Fi himself, Arbor
Xhaka.
So, Xhaka. Is that how you pronounce it? Xhaka?
Yeah, Xhaka.
Oh, yeah. I'm not going to say that last name again because that was difficult.
Hey, you know what's hilarious is I never have
Mr. Wi-Fi.
Yeah, Mr. Wi-Fi. It's Arbor Xhaka. His brother was drafted by the Habs too. You know me with names and ages. I'm usually just kind of doing this and throwing a dart at the board. But I'm with you. Yeah, it's Xhaka. But hey, all these teams still are still going to have to be, you're going to have to pluck some players off some bad teams at some point. So you're better off knowing the situations, the line combos, the depth now, so that you're getting those right guys in the right rounds.
And that's why you're tuning in every single day to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Thank you for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Remember, we're only 3 episodes a week right now in the month of August, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So make sure you're tuning in and your head's on a swivel for all the episodes that drop 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. Thank you so much again for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your summer bets out there, and we shall see you back here again on Friday.
Peace.